Yes.
From the point of view of the diaspora and the
Mm-hmm.
historical diaspora, um, there's often a lack of invitation from the continent and continental leaders, both private and public sectors, for the diaspora to be participant in that rise. What do you see as the role of the diaspora, both the new diaspora, meaning those who recently came from the continent, and those who historically were brought into captivity into the West? What's our role in this rise for Africa?
Permit me to give a historical context to the diaspora,
Please.
because the African diaspora is one that has contributed monumentally to the development of the countries where they resided. Look at the period when Africans were brought into this part of the world
Mm-hmm.
under slavery. Those were our best men and women when during the agrarian revolution, whether in the United States of America or in Europe, you took away nearly half of the population. The West did that.
Yes.
And these men and women over the years have participated in the development of the economies of their countries, and they have contributed in a manner that is to be admired. And at critical moments in history of the struggle for Africa, people like W.E.B. Du Bois
Mm-hmm.
were very present in the struggle. Marcus Garvey
Yes.
and many others whom we all know.
Yes.
And even during the civil rights movement, some of people like Martin Luther King Jr., Ralph Abernathy, Andrew Young, Jesse
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
these were individuals who are connected to the African Union.
Yes.
One, some may say it was at a spiritual level, at an intellectual level, at a philosophical level, but in very practical terms,
Right.
they made contribution.
Yes.
Then there was what has been described as the brain drain,
Yes.
when at critical moments in the history of Africa, the environment was made so toxic and hostile that some of our best professionals are today resident in Europe or the United States of America. They have this desire, this appetite to go home, or even if they don't go home physically, but to participate in the affairs of Africa. Have they been given an environment where they can participate, where their abilities can be exploited positively? Not always. And even if it has been, not consistently. But today, something is happening across Africa.
Yes.
In all countries, they are creating desks for the diaspora.
Mm.
Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Ethiopia, South Africa, Tanzania. And every so often, when heads of states and governments travel to the United States of America or to Europe, they want to meet people in the diaspora because they know that the resources of the diaspora combined, African diaspora combined, if it were a country, it would be a country with no less than 1 trillion GDP.
Yes.
If half of those resources were to find their way into the continent of Africa, and a conscious decision were to be made by the African Union that we are inviting these men and women who are Africans into the continent, and we are asking them to enter into the 55 odd countries by simply establishing cottage industries, one per country, and initially investing even seed money of only 1 billion United States dollars. That will be 55 billion United States shillings. Just about the same thing that the Chinese claim they gave us.
Yes.
It can be done, but it must be orderly.
Yes.
It must be orderly in what sense? I believe through the instrumentality of the African Union, there must be organized engagement with the diaspora, because the diaspora is organized in the United States of America, in Europe and in other parts of the world. So the first thing is organization, and it heartens me to note that in the United States of America there is such organization. So the next step is engagement. Sometimes we Africans remain on the drawing board for too long. Sometimes we analyze for too long. So we paralyze ourselves through analysis. My view is, let us move off the drawing board. Let us begin to make mistakes on the ground.
Yes.
And I think that is part of the message that some of us who are now crusading across the continent
Yes.
and across
Yes.
the world are saying, that perhaps our role is to annoy and irritate political power into action.
Yes.
And once they are annoyed and irritated, then they can begin to do the right thing so that we can move. And once again, I cannot reiterate this often enough. There are those who think that the dividends of this engagement will be realized in their lifetime. No. If it does in your lifetime, well and good. But I want to think of us as the generation that will plant the tree
Yes.
or plant the seed. Another generation will water that tree. Another generation will prune it. Another generation will enjoy her shade. If you look at it transgenerationally that way, then you know that this is a relay race. You run your leg, run it so well. And history has this habit of recording every other event, however innocuous they may appear in the early days.
Yes.
And that is my message.
Interesting. You know, I want to remain on the topic of the diaspora, and I think that, you know, when we in the West look at the continent and we have conversations about it, there are two groups in the diaspora that emerges, and we talk about them. One is the recent diaspora, the professionals that came from the continent in the last 50 years or so, and then there are the historical that we talked about, brought into captivity. For the for the recent diaspora, there is a sense of, you know, I'm Ghanaian, I'm Nigerian. But for the historical diaspora, folks like myself, who was born in Jamaica and then lived in the United States, it's difficult to connect with the continent in meaningful ways. So we can support ideas and concepts like Pan-Africanism and so forth. But how do I and others like myself who are interested in investing time, money, energy in the continent? Where do we go? What is the first stop in that process of saying, I'm ready to act today? What do I do?
Now, there are those who have categorized Africans in the diaspora in the manner that you've so clearly described, that there are those whose attachment to the continent is sentimental, and there are those whose attachment to the continental is practical in the sense that they came to the West essentially because the environment at home was not favorable, did not allow them to exploit their talents, and they came in pursuit of economic gains, which may be true. But I think that everyone in those categories has a role to play.
Yes.
Those who came in the very early days, whose attachment is not to any country, have a contribution in terms of ideas. And we saw that with people like Marcus Garvey. We saw that with people like W.E.B. Du Bois. We saw that with people like Martin Luther King Jr. during the struggle for independence. They were eloquent and articulate in saying that this is our mother continent. And to that extent, we draw our inspiration from there, so that at critical points in terms of historical reference, we are saying these are our people.
Yes.
So they can participate at the level of ideas.
Yes.
These ideas are the ideas that will give birth to practical activities. But beyond the ideas, there are areas which they can participate. The men and women that you are talking about are now to be found in the arts. They are to be found in sciences. And Africa is calling for these. If an environment were to be created for them,
Yes.
they would, in my view, participate. If you said, you come and participate in agriculture through investment, if the Unilever brothers are present, if Anglo Gold is present, if Rio Tinto is present, if China Wuyi is present, why can't Jamaican billionaires be investors with special terms in Ghana? In the Democratic Republic of Congo. These are very practical, not theoretical issues.
Indeed.
For those who are recent immigrants or those who are here who are dual citizenship, the connection is still very real.
Exactly.
They, of course, primarily identify with their countries, which they should and must, but they can contribute in a very practical way. And I'm not talking about theory. In the recent past, the Ethiopians in the diaspora, after the 1984 fall of the Derg regime, they have been participating in the economy. And you will know, for example, that the building of one of the largest hydroelectric dams in Africa, the Grand Renaissance Dam, was through the contribution of the Ethiopians in the diaspora. You will be told that most of the economic activities in a country like Eritrea is through the participation of their diaspora in Sweden and other parts of Europe and the United States of America. In Ghana, the remissions, in my own country, Kenya, the remittance that is received from different Kenyans in the diaspora is monumental. In Tanzania. So, in real terms, one is saying that what one needs is organization at home. And I said a little earlier that we are now beginning to see embassies, African countries, organizing themselves and saying, this is a desk for the diaspora. This is a department that deals with diaspora issues. And I am of the view that if this is organized in a proper manner, it will inform the terms of engagement going forward. But the last thing is that the diaspora must also make demands. I see no reason, for example, why the diaspora in its different permutations cannot, in the early days, get an observer status at the African Union, so that you are able to address every summit of the heads of states and government on clear issues. And it can be done, and the sooner it is under the aegis of Africa Agenda 2063, the safer we are. And you can see in other countries, if you look at India, she's always mindful of her population outside of India. If you look at the Japanese, if you look at all these countries, they are always conscious of what they are doing and what they can contribute. The Eastern Europeans, it is we of the African origin that must wake up to this reality and begin to do things back at home.
Indeed.
Yes.